Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Crystal Rogers. Crystal Rogers, a devoted 35-year-old mother of 4 from Bardstown, Kentucky, shared custody with her ex-husband Keith despite their separation. They maintained a friendly relationship for their children's sake. Crystal lived 45 miles southeast of Louisville with her current boyfriend, Brooks Holt, and their 2-year-old son. As a responsible and reliable parent, Crystal always responded to her mother Sherri Ballard's calls. However, when Sherri couldn't reach Crystal on July 5, 2015, she grew concerned. It was unusual for Crystal to ignore her mother's calls, and Sherri's worry intensified with each passing hour. After 24 hours of silence, Sherri's maternal instincts told her something was wrong. She tried contacting Crystal multiple times, but her efforts were met with silence. Sherri then reached out to Crystal's friends and family, hoping someone could provide information about her daughter's whereabouts. Crystal's family had not seen or heard from her in a while, which was unusual. Her sister Brooke tried to reach her but couldn't, and her boyfriend Brooks said he hadn't seen her since Friday night when she was playing games on her phone before he went to bed. When Brooks woke up the next morning, Crystal was gone, and he thought she might have gone to visit her cousin for the 4th of July. However, Crystal's mother Sherri was worried and tried to contact her, but couldn't. She reported Crystal missing to the police, and just then, her son Casey got a call from a friend who had seen Crystal's car on the side of the road. This made Casey and his father Tommy very concerned, as they knew Crystal would never leave her car behind. When they arrived at the location, they found Crystal's car with a flat tire, which only added to their fear that something was seriously wrong. If Crystal had car trouble, she would have contacted someone for help, not tried to fix it herself. The fact that her keys, phone, and purse was still in the car on the passenger seat was suspicious. Crystal never went anywhere without these belongings, so their presence added to the concern about her safety. After finding her car on the Bluegrass Parkway, Crystal's father and brother notified the Nelson County Sheriff's Department. Investigators searched the car but found no signs of a struggle. However, they did notice something unusual. The driver's seat was adjusted for someone taller than Crystal. This raised suspicions that someone else might have been driving her car. The authorities asked for witnesses to come forward, but no one provided any useful information to aid the investigation. The police decided to seek the public's help through the media, releasing Crystal's photo and asking for anyone with information to come forward. Despite their efforts, no significant leads were discovered. Crystal's father, Tommy, took matters into his own hands, organizing search parties to find his daughter. However, the challenging hot and humid weather conditions hindered their searches. Many people helped search for Crystal, but one person who was noticeably absent was her boyfriend, Brooks Holt. The police grew suspicious of Brooks because he seemed unconcerned about Crystal's disappearance, especially since she was the mother of his child. When questioned, Brooks claimed that Crystal and their son had gone with him to his family's farm the night before. Brooks said they returned home around midnight, and he went to bed. He stated that Crystal stayed up late playing games on her phone, as she often did. Brooks claimed that when he woke up at 7 a.m., his son was in bed with him, but Crystal was missing. At first, he thought maybe she had gone out with her cousin. However, those close to Crystal disagreed with Brooks' story. They knew Crystal would never leave her 2-year-old son behind, as they were extremely close. In fact, Crystal's sister, Brooke, believed Crystal was planning to leave Brooks because he had been dishonest with her and showed little emotional attachment. Crystal had told her mother, Sher, that she wanted to end her relationship with Brooks, but she was afraid to do so because he was controlling. Crystal's brother, Casey, had also noticed the tension between them and had seen them arguing several times. The police asked Brooks to come in for questioning and gave him a polygraph test, but the results were inconclusive. After the test, Brooks had a formal interview with the detectives. They had gathered evidence that supported his alibi, including a video that showed his truck entering his family's farm and leaving around midnight. However, because the truck had tinted windows, they couldn't determine who was in the vehicle at the time. Brooks explained that while he was at the farm, he did some chores, set a fire to dispose of building materials, and waited for the fire to die out before driving back home. During the interview, the police asked him about a brief 13-second phone call he made to a business associate, Steve Lawson, on his way back from the farm. To clear up any confusion, Brooks asked Steve Lawson to explain their conversation to the police during the interview and called him. However, the police was skeptical when Steve Lawson claimed he had called Brooks to ask for the phone number of a rental property, as it sounded like a rehearsed alibi. According to Steve Lawson, Brooks told him he needed to wait until he got home to get the number from Crystal, who handled such matters. The police were puzzled by this, questioning why Brooks couldn't simply hand the phone to Crystal, who was with him at the time, and resolve the issue right then. They wondered why Brooks had to wait to talk to her in person. During the interview, Brooks received a call from his brother Nick, a police officer at the Bardstown Police Department, who advised Brooks to leave the interrogation room immediately. The police were skeptical that Crystal had voluntarily abandoned her car on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway. They suspected that something had happened to her while she was at the Brooks HW family farm. As the investigation into her disappearance progressed, several people came forward claiming to have seen Brooks's truck and his brother Nick's police car at the Howe family farm. Detectives became increasingly convinced that the brothers were at the farm, attempting to destroy evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. To obtain more information, the police decided to bring Nick, Brooks's brother, in for questioning. They confronted him with eyewitness accounts that placed him at his family's farm on July 8th, and asked him to provide an explanation for his presence there. Nick claimed to have no idea what the police were referring to, and said he wasn't out that night. But the police didn't believe him. They directly asked Nick if he and his brother had destroyed or hidden evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. Nick firmly denied any wrongdoing and swore that his brother was incapable of harming anyone. The police officer, Nick, was adamant that he would never assist in covering up a crime, including helping Brooks. After the interview, Nick agreed to take a polygraph test, but he failed 2 questions: whether he knew Crystal's current location and if he was withholding information about her disappearance. Despite failing the polygraph, Nick insisted he was telling the truth. On October 15th, the police investigation identified Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Holt, as the prime suspect in her disappearance. The same day, Nick, Brooks' brother, was fired from the Bardstown Police Department for hindering the investigation. Although the police were confident they knew who was responsible for Crystal's disappearance and death, they lacked sufficient evidence to make an arrest. They were hesitant to take their suspect to court without solid evidence, fearing an acquittal would prevent them from retrying the case due to double jeopardy. In Kentucky, the FBI and local law enforcement joined Crystal's friends, family, and volunteers in an extensive search effort at the 240-acre Howe family farm. Despite daily searches, Crystal's loved ones were left frightened and desperate for any news. The searchers hoped to find Crystal safe and sound, but they also needed answers. At the farm, investigators thoroughly examined the remains of a fire, but they didn't find any human remains. They did discover pieces of clothing in the ashes, but they couldn't link them to Crystal's disappearance. The police issued multiple search warrants for the farm, targeting vehicles and homes. However, these searches didn't produce any significant leads or evidence related to Crystal's case. A $100,000 reward was offered for information about her disappearance, but no one came forward with any information. Tommy Ballard, Crystal's dad, was driven to find his daughter. Her disappearance hit him hard, especially since he'd already gone through a similar tragedy. In 1979, his pregnant sister was brutally murdered by her husband and his friend. They shot her, beat her, and then burned and scattered her remains on a farm. Though it took years, the perpetrators were eventually caught, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. Despite this painful past, Tommy refused to give up on finding Crystal. He pursued every lead, no matter how small, and explored every avenue. He talked to neighbors, interviewed potential witnesses, and contacted anyone who might have information. To aid his search, Tommy spent his own savings on hiring experts, including cadaver dogs and a private investigator. Tommy Ballard was determined to solve the mystery, so he kept detailed records of every tip he followed and clue he found. He regularly met with the police to share his discoveries and get their input. On an early November morning in 2016, Tommy took his 11-year-old grandson, Crystal's son, on a hunting trip on their property. Tommy's wife, Sherri, watched as they left, feeling a sense of unease. She quickly said a prayer, asking God to watch over them in the woods. Sherri then returned to bed, trying to relax. However, just minutes later, the phone rang, shattering her peace. When she answered, she heard her panicked grandson on the other end. "Papa has been shot," he cried, his voice trembling with fear. Sherri's heart sank, and she was overcome with panic. She rushed to the bathroom, grabbing clothes as she went, while her grandson continued to cry on the phone. Sherri quickly reassured her husband, telling him she was calling 911 as she rapidly got dressed. Her mind was flooded with worries about his condition. When she arrived at the scene, she was met with an overwhelming sense of grief. She rushed to Tommy's side, shaking him vigorously, but her distress turned to horror as she saw blood gushing from his nose. When officers and witnesses arrived, they quickly pulled Sherri away from Tommy so that medical personnel could tend to him. However, Sherri knew her husband was already dead. Tommy Ballard was pronounced dead at the scene, having been shot once in the chest. Initially, the police suggested that Tommy's death was a hunting accident, which outraged Sherri. She was adamant that this was not an accident, but rather a deliberate murder. As the investigation unfolded, authorities ruled out the possibility that Tommy took his own life, finding that his weapon had not been fired. They also cleared Tommy's 11-year-old grandson of any involvement in the shooting. Eventually, the Kentucky State Police announced that they were treating Tommy's death as a murder investigation. The Ballard family believes that Tommy's murder was connected to his investigation into his daughter Crystal's disappearance. They think those responsible for harming Crystal wanted Tommy silenced, fearing he might uncover the truth. In 2022, the FBI led a 5-day investigation into Crystal Rogers' disappearance, returning to the Haar family farm to gather more evidence. Their goal was to collect enough evidence to hold the responsible individual accountable. Although the FBI didn't disclose what they found, a spokesperson confirmed in October 2022 that all evidence collected would be analyzed at the FBI's lab in Quantico as the investigation continued. The Kentucky Attorney General made a key decision, appointing a special prosecutor to help with the prosecution of criminal charges related to the deaths of Crystal Rogers and her father, Tommy Ballard. Crystal's mother, Sherri Ballard, was informed of the appointment and strongly supported it, believing it was necessary to ensure justice for her loved ones. In July 2023, a Kentucky grand jury indicted 32-year-old Joseph Lawson on 2 counts: conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence, both related to Crystal's disappearance. 2 months later, Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Houck, was arrested and charged with murder and tampering with physical evidence. The judge set his bond at $10 million and ordered him to avoid contact with Crystal's family. The people of Bardstown felt a mix of emotions when Brooks Houck was arrested for Crystal's murder. While the news was heartbreaking, bringing home the reality that Crystal was not just missing, but had been killed, many felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that justice would be served. The arrest brought a sense of closure and relief to those affected by Crystal's tragic death. Brooks Houck appeared in court virtually 1 month after his October 2023 arrest. This crucial hearing brought new revelations about another unsolved Bardstown murder. The judge asked prosecutor Shane Young if his team was investigating any other cases connected to Crystal's case. The prosecutor was investigating 2 connected murders: Crystal's murder and the murder of her father, Tommy Ballard. They believed they had the gun used to kill Tommy, which they claimed to have purchased from Nick Houck, who allegedly used a fake name during the sale. Brooks Houck's attorneys requested that the Nelson County judge be disqualified from the case, citing bias and unfair treatment since 2017. They also argued that the $10 million bail was excessive. However, the Kentucky Appeals Court ruled against Houck, upholding the $10 million bond and denying his request to replace the judge. In a separate development, Stephen Lawson was indicted in December 2023 on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. Notably, Stephen Lawson's son, Joseph Lawson, had been arrested in connection with Crystal's disappearance. The case of Greg Mulvihill. Diana Lovejoy and Greg Mulvihill, both living far from their families, met through an online dating site in 2005. They quickly formed a strong bond, and their relationship soon turned serious. The couple then decided to move in together in San Diego. Diana had always been passionate about athletics and fitness, starting with playing sports in high school and eventually becoming a competitive triathlete. The couple shared a love for the outdoors, which played a significant role in their relationship. During the 2000s, San Diego was emerging as a major tech hub, and Diana and Greg took advantage of the abundant job opportunities. Both Diana and Greg excelled in their careers, with Diana being known for her dependability by her coworkers. After 2 years of dating, they got married in 2007, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. For their honeymoon, they chose Costa Rica, where they attended surf school. Diana and Greg were deeply in love during the early years of their marriage. They shared a passion for life and made the most of every opportunity that came their way, enjoying countless adventures together. After their wedding, they moved to Carlsbad, a picturesque suburb north of San Diego, which offered a perfect blend of natural beauty, outdoor activities, and seclusion. Diana was immediately smitten with the area and felt like she was living her dream when she settled into her ideal home. However, 3 years into their marriage, their relationship started to take a turn. Diana began to experience symptoms that led her to believe she had fibromyalgia, a chronic condition characterized by widespread pain and tenderness in specific areas of the body. Although the exact cause of fibromyalgia remains unknown, several factors are thought to contribute to its development. Diana's fibromyalgia diagnosis significantly impacted her marriage to Greg. Previously an energetic and adventurous person, she struggled to adapt to her new limitations, including reduced stress and rest. This sudden change in lifestyle created challenges for their relationship as a couple. In 2011, Greg took Diana on a relaxing vacation to Santa Cruz, California, to help her cope with her condition. As a caring husband, Greg recognized the toll fibromyalgia was taking on Diana's well-being, including constant muscle pain, fatigue, and limited energy. The illness made it difficult for her to maintain her job, and eventually, Diana had to step away from her career to focus on managing her symptoms. She began spending more time at home in Carlsbad. Above all, Diana's greatest desire was to be a mother, to love and raise a child, to be confident and happy. Diana and Greg had been trying to have a child for years, but unfortunately, Diana suffered multiple miscarriages. These losses took a toll on Diana, affecting her both physically and emotionally. Although she didn't have children, she poured her love into her 2 beloved cats, Lanny and Turtle. However, her world was turned upside down when Turtle fell ill and eventually passed away. To comfort Diana during this difficult time, Greg surprised her with a new kitten, which she named Taffy. This thoughtful gesture brought Diana immense comfort. In a surprising turn of events, Diana discovered she was pregnant after years of unsuccessful attempts to conceive. Overjoyed, Greg looked forward to becoming a father, while Diana felt her dream of motherhood finally within reach. In September 2012, Diana gave birth to a baby boy, and Greg took time off work to bond with their newborn son. Greg loved being a father and cherished every moment with his son. Diana, on the other hand, was always worried about her son's health and happiness. As time passed, she started to suspect that her son might have a similar condition to her fibromyalgia. However, Greg was convinced that their son was healthy and didn't see any reason to worry. Despite their differing opinions on their son's health, Diana remained convinced that her son was ill. She began researching extensively and discovered a medication called guaifenesin, which was similar to Mucinex and often used to treat chest infections. Some people believed it could also alleviate fibromyalgia symptoms. Diana was determined to give her son high doses of guaifenesin, but Greg strongly opposed the idea, fearing it was unnecessary and could harm their son. This disagreement over their son's healthcare created growing tension in their marriage. Diana and Greg's marriage became increasingly strained after Greg suffered a shoulder injury that forced him to quit his job. As a result, the household income decreased, and Diana took a sales job to compensate. She also tried to earn extra money by creating online cooking videos, with Greg handling the camera work. However, this venture didn't yield the desired results. Diana also appeared in promotional videos for kitty litter, but this effort also failed to bring in significant revenue. As their financial struggles continued, Diana and Greg's disagreements escalated, particularly regarding their 2-year-old son's health. By this point, they were constantly fighting, and their relationship was in jeopardy. Diana confided in her co-workers that she felt Greg was unhelpful and unsupportive. In July 2014, Greg had a disturbing encounter with a police officer who questioned him about allegations of abuse made by Diana. According to the officer, Diana had filed multiple police reports against Greg, leading to his removal from the family home. Diana and their son were allowed to stay, leaving Greg to face the consequences of the allegations. Diana told a trusted friend that she had been assaulted by Greg while she was sleeping. She took medication that made her drowsy, and when she started to wake up, she realized Greg was touching her inappropriately without her permission. Diana also accused Greg of sexually abusing their son. The authorities, including Child Protective Services, got involved after Diana made these allegations. Greg denied the accusations and claimed that Diana was only making these charges because he disagreed with her about their son's health issues. In response, Greg filed for divorce from Diana and requested custody of their son. Detectives investigated claims that Greg abused Diana and their son, but found no evidence to support these allegations. In fact, psychiatric evaluations of Greg and the boy revealed no signs of abuse. A judge ultimately dropped the case and granted Greg 50-50 custody of their son, much to Diana's dismay. Despite this, Diana remained committed to being a good mother and distancing herself from Greg and the associated drama. As part of their divorce agreement, Diana stayed in the house and agreed to compensate Greg for his share of the property. By 2016, the former couple had managed to establish a relatively peaceful co-parenting arrangement, with each having equal access to their son. However, this fragile peace was shattered on September 1, 2016, when the Carlsbad Police Department received a call from Jason Kovac, a friend of Greg's. Jason called 911 to report that his friend Greg had been shot multiple times and was bleeding severely. A patrol officer from the Carlsbad Police Department responded immediately and found Jason and Greg on the side of the road. Jason told the officer that the shooting had occurred about half a mile away. The officer quickly realized that waiting for an ambulance would put Greg's life at risk, so he decided to drive Greg to the hospital himself. Meanwhile, the SWAT team arrived and began searching the area for the shooter, but they couldn't find anyone. At the hospital, Doctors rushed Greg into emergency surgery, where they discovered he had a gunshot wound to his chest. Greg survived the surgery, but he was placed on life support afterwards. While Greg recovered in the hospital, detectives interviewed Jason, who was still shaken by the event. Jason explained that Greg had received a call from a private investigator claiming to have important documents related to his custody and divorce proceedings with Diana. The investigator didn't leave his name, but he gave Greg a specific meeting time and location. Greg was initially hesitant, but his curiosity got the better of him, and he asked Jason to come along for backup. Jason agreed, and they armed themselves with a flashlight and a child's baseball bat. They arrived at the remote location, which was extremely dark due to the new moon. The only light came from a small sliver of the moon. According to Jason, the caller instructed Greg to find a package attached to an electricity pole. When Greg saw the package, he walked towards it with his flashlight, scanning the area. Suddenly, he shouted, "Gun!" and a gunshot rang out. Greg and Jason started running for their lives, with bullets whizzing past their heads. They eventually reached their car, where Jason realized Greg had been shot and called 911. Jason couldn't provide a detailed description of the shooter, but he led the detectives to the exact location of the shooting. During their investigation, they found an intriguing clue near the electricity pole, a neatly folded Angry Birds towel that seemed to be intentionally left there to deceive Greg. Jason reported hearing 6 gunshots, but the investigators found no evidence of shell casings or a weapon. This lack of forensic evidence suggested that the shooter was experienced and knowledgeable about covering their tracks. During their search, the detectives noticed a strong smell of feces in the air, which led them to a pile of feces accompanied by a towel that seemed to have been used for cleanup. The investigators preserved the feces sample and towel as potential evidence, carefully packaging and transporting them to the crime lab for analysis. However, obtaining DNA evidence from the feces sample could take up to a month. In the meantime, the detectives continued their search for a suspect, investigating all available evidence and following up on leads. They focused on Greg's estranged wife, Diana Lovejoy, and questioned her about her possible involvement in the shooting. Diana denied any knowledge and provided an alibi, stating she was at home with her son at the time of the shooting. Greg unexpectedly woke up from life support and began to recover. When he was well enough, he was interviewed by detectives, who asked about his estranged wife's potential involvement. Greg expressed doubt that Diana was capable of such violence, but acknowledged their past conflicts and ongoing divorce and custody battle over their son. The detectives acquired the phone number used to lure Greg to the remote area, which led them to a pay-as-you-go plan and a purchase at Best Buy near Carlsbad. They obtained video footage of the purchase, which showed Diana Lovejoy buying the phone. This solidified her as the prime suspect, and she was arrested during a traffic stop. Diana claimed innocence during her arrest, but when confronted with the evidence, she admitted to buying the phone. She then revealed that she was afraid of Greg, had purchased a gun, and took shooting classes at Iron Sights, where she met instructor Weldon McDavid, an ex-Marine weapons expert. Diana's friendship with Weldon turned romantic and intimate. She told the detective that they planned to scare her estranged husband Greg to stop his harassment. Weldon told Diana to buy a specific phone, which they used to lure Greg to a remote location. Diana claimed Weldon's role was only to threaten Greg, not to use violence. She drove Weldon to the site and picked him up afterwards. When she heard police sirens, Weldon told her he had to shoot Greg in self-defense because Greg allegedly made aggressive moves towards him. Diana denied involvement in the shooting and said she never asked Greg to take violent action against her. She was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Greg recovered from his gunshot wound and was released from the hospital. However, news of Diana's involvement horrified people. Weldon was tracked down and brought in for questioning. Weldon told the detectives he was at home, 30 minutes away, on the night of the shooting. When asked for a DNA sample, Weldon became nervous. The detectives asked if his DNA would be at the crime scene, and Weldon claimed to remember stopping to use the bathroom on a dirt road the night before. The detectives obtained a search warrant and found a rifle with a live round and 6 spent shell casings in Weldon's garage. The shell casings matched a witness's account of hearing 6 gunshots. Weldon was arrested for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Searching Diana's house, the detectives found a suspicious search history on her computer. She had searched for "new moon," which coincided with the night of the shooting. This was significant because there was minimal ambient light during new moons, making it a suitable time for the murder. The detectives concluded that Diana had premeditated knowledge of the shooting and a motive to kill Greg. She would have had to pay him $120,000 in their divorce settlement, and eliminating him would be easier than paying the debt. Diana Lovejoy and Weldon McDavid's trial began in October 2017. Weldon claimed he never intended to shoot Greg. Weldon claimed his goal was only to scare Greg, but the situation escalated when either Greg or Jason yelled, "I got a gun." Weldon stated that, as a skilled marksman, if he had wanted to kill Greg, he would have been able to do so. However, the prosecution presented a different theory. They argued that Weldon did not shoot and kill Greg because Greg shone a flashlight in Weldon's eyes, disorienting him due to the darkness. Having sat in the dark for an extended period, Weldon's sense of direction was impaired. This ultimately saved Greg's life. The jury found Diana Lovejoy and Weldon McDavid guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Upon hearing the verdict, Diana collapsed, although the state believes she was faking it. Weldon was sentenced to 50 years to life, while Diana was sentenced to 26 years to life. Both maintain their innocence. The case of Alexandria Costal. Alexandria Ally Costal was born on September 11, 1997, in St. Louis, Missouri. From an early age, her warm and caring personality drew people to her. She had a remarkable ability to make others feel at ease and happy, which made her a well-loved figure in her community. Ally's friendly nature allowed her to connect with people from all backgrounds. She was never afraid to approach someone new and start a conversation. Her kind and compassionate heart was evident in her willingness to help others, whether it was by lending a hand or simply listening to those in need. During her time at Lindbergh High School, Ally was an active student who participated in track and cheerleading. It was there that she met her best friend, Maddie Norris, and they formed a lifelong bond. Their friendship was built on mutual trust and a deep emotional connection, going beyond a typical friendship to become more like sisters. After graduating from high school, Ally enrolled at the University of Mississippi, also known as Ole Miss, in Oxford, Mississippi. Although several boys had asked her to prom, she didn't have a date. Luckily, her friend Maddie stepped in and offered to be her date. At Ole Miss, Ally joined the Alpha Phi sorority as a founding member and became the president of the Ole Miss Golf Club. She also immersed herself in the university's rich traditions, including its mascot, the Ole Miss Rebels. At a campus party, Ally met Eliza Brick, and they instantly clicked, as if they'd known each other for years. Ally's passion for capturing stunning sunset shots became a mission. One night, while out at a bar in downtown Oxford, Ally met Brandon Thydell from Fort Worth, Texas. She found him cute and developed a crush on him. However, Brandon's behavior ultimately hurt Ally, as she had trusted him to make an effort to connect with her and her best friend, Maddie. In July 2019, Ally's parents, Cindy and Keith, visited her in Oxford for a few days before her senior year at Ole Miss. They were excited to see their daughter thriving at the university and experience her life there. On their scheduled departure day, July 19th, Cindy called Ally around 7 p.m. Still half asleep from a nap, Ally mentioned her plans to go out with friends that evening. Unbeknownst to Cindy, this ordinary conversation would be her last with her daughter. About 30 minutes from Oxford lies Sardis Lake, a vast area popular for its hunting camps and recreational spots. On June 20th, 2019, an officer was tasked with patrolling the lake in the early morning hours when it was still dark and eerily quiet. While driving around the lake, the officer came across something unusual near a picnic table. Upon closer inspection, he was met with a grisly scene: a young woman's lifeless body, riddled with at least 9 gunshot wounds. The discovery of the body, later identified as Ally, at Sardis Lake prompted authorities to notify her parents, Cindy and Keith. However, the couple was far away in St. Louis, unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded. A middle-of-the-night phone call shattered their peace, informing them of the devastating news that their daughter had fallen victim to a homicide. After hearing the tragic news, Ally's friends took to social media to mourn her loss and call for justice. They created the hashtag #JusticeForAlly to bring their voices together and make their demands for justice louder. In their social media posts, Ally's friends shared happy memories of her and the positive impact she had on their lives. These heartfelt tributes aimed to celebrate Ally's memory and offer sympathy to her family. After Ally's tragic murder, her friends and community mourned the loss of a vibrant and joyful person. Basandra Kendrick, a recent University of Mississippi graduate and close friend, expressed her sorrow. Brash, another recent graduate who worked in student housing, described Ally as someone with an infectious happiness and a positive outlook. According to Brash, Ally always had a big smile on her face, reflecting her bright spirit. Brash met Ally while working as a community desk assistant in Crosby Hall, the largest residence hall on campus. Ally would often stop by and chat with Brash when they were on duty. Brash remembered Ally as a sweet girl who lived life to the fullest and cherished every moment. Ally's sorority, Alpha F, issued a statement after her murder, expressing shock and sadness at the loss of one of their members. They extended their deepest sympathies to Ally's family during this incredibly difficult time and hoped for comfort for their sisters. Anna Pascoe, another close friend from the University of Mississippi, posted on Facebook to express her heartfelt condolences for the loss of her friend. She described Ally as the most genuine and uplifting person she had ever known, emphasizing the significant impact Ally had on the lives of those fortunate enough to have met her. Emily Groh, a fellow cheerleader of Ally at Lindbergh High School, took to Twitter to express her shock and sadness over Ally's murder. She cherished the time they spent together on the squad, praising Ally's bright and positive attitude. Emily regretted not having had the chance to get to know Ally better. At the Sardis Lake crime scene, where Ally's body was found, investigators discovered several cans of White Claw seltzer and .40 caliber shell casings scattered on the ground. A ballistic expert was called in to analyze the scene and piece together what had happened. The expert's findings revealed that the killer had initially sat across from Ally on the picnic table benches when they fired the first shot. However, after the first shot, the killer stood up and began circling the table, moving closer to Ally with each step. The expert theorized that with each step, the killer fired at Ally again. One of the rounds fired by the killer missed its target and got stuck in the wooden picnic table. Crime scene investigators searched Ally's apartment, looking for any clues that could help identify and catch her killer. During the search, they found her Apple Watch, but surprisingly, her phone was nowhere to be found. Yet, some of her messages from the previous night had mysteriously synced with her watch. The investigators examined the content of these messages and discovered that Ally had been chatting with Brandon at length. The messages revealed that Ally and Brandon had planned to meet up. The detective in charge of Ally's murder case contacted Brandon on Sunday, the day after her murder, and asked him to come to the police station for an interview. Brandon told the detective he was unavailable that day, but offered to meet the next morning at 8:30 a.m. However, Brandon failed to show up for the scheduled interview. Following his no-show, the police began tracking his cell phone. The phone's location data showed that Brandon was driving on Interstate 55, heading towards Memphis. The police issued an arrest warrant for Brandon, suspecting he was fleeing, and broadcast a "be on the lookout" alert for his vehicle, which was easily recognizable due to its unique license plate. 2 hours later, the Memphis Fugitive Task Force spotted Brandon's car at a gas station, where he was sitting at a pump. The agents apprehended Brandon and notified the Mississippi police. Upon searching Brandon's vehicle, investigators found a .40 caliber gun. Additionally, when Brandon exited the car, they noticed bloodstains on his clothing. Once Brandon was arrested and extradited to Mississippi, detectives started reconstructing his activities in the days preceding Ally's murder. On Saturday, July 20th, Brandon spent the day with friends, going bowling. The next day, he visited another friend's house, bringing a 6-pack of beer and his .40 caliber gun. The friend reported that they talked for a while, but when he woke up on Monday, Brandon had left. During the investigation, detectives found that Brandon had no history of physical fights or violence. They also gathered information from Brandon's friends and Ally's loved ones, who said that the couple had met at a local bar in Oxford during their freshman year and started dating casually. However, their relationship took a turn for the worse during their sophomore year. Ally's loved ones noticed that she became more invested in the relationship than Brandon, causing tension between them. This led to Brandon blocking Ally's attempts to contact him because she would often go out, get drunk, and call him. 1 year after their initial separation, Brandon and Ally rekindled their romance during the summer before her senior year. They decided to give their relationship another chance and started dating again. However, their reunion was short-lived, as Ally was tragically murdered, and Brandon was subsequently charged with capital murder, which carries the death penalty. Capital murder is the most severe criminal offense, and the state accused Brandon of kidnapping Ally by luring her to Sardis Lake. The news of Brandon's arrest sent shockwaves throughout Oxford, with the details of Ally's murder being widely reported. The arrest sparked widespread speculation and rumors among community members, who exchanged various theories. Reporters flooded the town, seeking interviews and information from those closest to Ally and Brandon. This media frenzy brought both positive and negative attention to Oxford, as outsiders watched with a mix of fascination and concern. In September 2019, Brandon pleaded not guilty to Ally's murder. As detectives built their case, they reviewed the couple's text messages. In April 2019, 3 months before her murder, Ally was preparing for spring semester finals and considering the possibility of being pregnant. On April 14th, Ally sent Brandon a photo of an inconclusive home pregnancy test. Brandon responded, saying they would wait to confirm the pregnancy, but if it was true, he was against keeping the baby. He suggested Ally could get an abortion pill. Ally, however, was unsure about ending the pregnancy. She mentioned the possibility of meeting someone who would love her and the baby. Despite Ally's doubts, Brandon remained firm in his decision, telling Ally he was serious and that having a child would ruin his life. Detectives found CCTV footage showing Ally leaving a bar on Oxford Square around 11:45 p.m. on July 18th. About an hour later, around 1:30 a.m., Ally met up with Brandon, who drove them to Sardis Lake. According to Brandon's lawyers, both Ally and Brandon had been drinking throughout the day. Brandon's lawyers claim that when they arrived at Sardis Lake, they sat at a picnic table, listened to music, and at some point, Brandon got up to do drugs by his truck. He then returned to Ally, went back to his car, and got his .40 caliber gun. A shooting allegedly took place across the lake, according to Brandon's lawyer. After the incident, Brandon sat back down and talked with Ally for a while. However, things suddenly took a deadly turn when Brandon shot and killed her. Brandon's lawyer argues that his actions were caused by his intoxication from drugs and alcohol. Detectives and Ally's family saw the incident differently. They suspected Brandon of murder because they thought he believed Ally was pregnant, and this would ruin his life. In their view, the killing was a deliberate, cold-blooded, and well-planned act. On August 27, 2021, Brandon accepted a plea deal, spared from the death penalty, and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Ally's loved ones, wearing her favorite color pink, filled the courtroom to show their support. After the judge announced the sentence, Brandon addressed Ally's family, expressing remorse for his actions and asking for their forgiveness. He acknowledged the immense pain he caused and hoped they could find it in their hearts to pardon him. Ally's autopsy report concluded that she was not pregnant at the time of her murder. However, this does not rule out the possibility that Ally was pregnant at some point. Ally's mother, Cindy, firmly believes that Ally was pregnant and lost the baby. A memorial was set up at Sardis Lake, where Ally was murdered by her family and friends. Her parents, Cindy and Keith, hold on to memories of their daughter, even though the silence is still painful for them. Every time Ally's friends see a pink sunset, they think of her. They have devoted themselves to keeping her memory alive, working to spread her positivity and make sure she is never forgotten. The case of Katrina Ashley Edlund Smith. Katrina Ashley Edlund was born on July 16, 1982, to her mother Vicky. She had two siblings, an older brother named Chad and a younger sister named Miranda, who looked up to Katrina as a role model. As children, Miranda would often try on Katrina's clothes and use her makeup, admiring her older sister and wanting to be just like her. As the years passed, Katrina and Miranda formed a strong bond, becoming more like best friends than sisters. Katrina grew up in Musney Park, Illinois, a suburban community outside the city, after her parents separated, and she lived with her mother. Those who knew Katrina described her as a kind, fun-loving person who cherished the holiday season and enjoyed giving humorous gifts to her friends and family. She was deeply involved in her church and had a strong desire to help others, always willing to lend a hand to those in need. Despite her happiness, Katrina longed to find love and thought she had found it when she met Todd Smith at a bar when she was 20 years old. Todd, a self-employed financial planner, had 3 daughters and worked from home. He met Katrina, and despite their differences, they clicked. Todd's flexible schedule allowed them to travel frequently. After 3 years together, Todd proposed to Katrina, and she happily accepted. They planned a small wedding in a local park, and Katrina was thrilled about their future. She loved Todd's daughters and was eager to build a life with him. Katrina's family, including her mother Vicky and siblings Chad and Miranda, adored Todd and thought he was an excellent match for Katrina. They trusted him to take care of her and believed the couple was meant to be. After marrying, Katrina and Todd settled in Musney Park and started their new life together. On October 20th, 2012, Katrina, 30, called her mother and said she was house-sitting for a friend. During their conversation, she mentioned she would visit for dinner on October 24th and had news to share. Vicky suspected that something was amiss, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Before ending their phone call, Vicky promised Katrina that she would cook her favorite meal, chicken and dumplings. Tragically, Vicky would never get the chance to keep that promise. Days later, Katrina vanished, and Vicky would never lay eyes on her again. On October 23rd, at 5 p.m., Todd, Katrina's husband, called 911 to report her disappearance. He told the dispatcher that Katrina was house-sitting for a friend and that he had been trying to reach her for hours without success. When he drove to the house, he found it empty. Katrina's siblings, Miranda and Chad, were alarmed when they heard the news. Chad, who was undergoing military training in Oklahoma, immediately flew to Illinois to help search for his sister. On the evening of the 23rd, a concerned citizen notified the police about an abandoned vehicle near Rock River. The caller reported that the car was not parked on the road, but rather in an easement, suggesting it had been hastily abandoned. When authorities arrived to investigate, they ran the license plate and identified it as belonging to Katrina Smith. Upon inspecting the vehicle, the officer found no signs of a struggle or any trace of Katrina herself. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was adamant that her daughter's disappearance was a clear indication of foul play when she learned that Katrina's car had been abandoned in an unfamiliar area. It was the only logical explanation to Vicky. If Katrina's car was found in that location, someone must have taken her and left the car there. Following the discovery of her car, Katrina's case was officially categorized as a missing person, and the search efforts intensified significantly. On October 12th at 11 p.m., the police took Todd Smith in for a formal interview at the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. During the interview, Todd told the detective that he last saw his wife Katrina on October 10th, not October 22nd. He stated that Katrina had come home briefly to do laundry in preparation for a big job interview the following day. According to Todd, while the laundry was in progress, Katrina left to go to the mall to make a purchase and returned home at 8:30 p.m. Todd reported that Katrina briefly returned home before leaving again to make one last stop. She had told him she needed to complete an errand before returning to the house she was watching for a friend. The next day, after Katrina was declared missing, Todd made an emotional appeal to the media, pleading for her safe return. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears as he begged for anyone with information about her whereabouts to come forward. As the search for Katrina continued, search teams composed of officers and volunteers worked tirelessly to find her. They focused their efforts on a nearby park, where Katrina's car had been abandoned, hoping to find evidence or clues about her disappearance. When Katrina's brother Chad arrived in Illinois from his army training in Oklahoma, he joined the search for his missing sister at the park. With his military background, Chad took charge of the search party. He created a map, divided the volunteers into teams, and coordinated their efforts to ensure a thorough search. As the search continued, the officers employed a methodical approach, using dogs and walking in straight lines to cover as much ground as possible and detect any potential evidence, no matter how small. Meanwhile, Katrina's mother Vicky focused on spreading awareness about her daughter's disappearance. She posted missing person flyers at gas stations, convenience stores, and lampposts throughout the town, hoping to reach as many people as possible. Despite her overwhelming grief and fear of finding her daughter's body, Vicky was determined to keep searching for Katrina, even if she couldn't participate in the physical search herself. Todd, Katrina's husband, was overcome with emotion during this difficult time. Chad, trying to be supportive, urged Todd to stay strong and focused on finding Katrina. He stood by Todd's side, sympathetic to his brother-in-law's grief. Meanwhile, the police investigation turned up some disturbing clues. An officer found Katrina's purse near her abandoned car, and as he searched further down the road, he discovered more of her belongings, including her cell phone and bloody towels. It was clear that someone had deliberately discarded Katrina's possessions as they drove away from her car. Unfortunately, the police still had no idea where Katrina was, but they feared the worst. The recovered items were sent to the crime lab for analysis, and the police awaited the results with bated breath. As the police searched for clues, they explored every aspect of Katrina's personal life to understand what might have led to her disappearance. They wanted to know if she had any relationships outside her marriage, was involved in gambling or drugs, and what her daily routines were like. To gather this information, they interviewed her friends and family. Everyone they spoke to described Katrina as a kind, responsible person who always put her duties first and avoided anything risky. Her loved ones said she was dedicated to her job and had a strong work ethic. They also reported that she never showed any signs of addiction or irresponsible behavior. The people who knew Katrina described her as a loyal partner and a hard worker who always did the right thing. During the investigation into her disappearance, a woman came forward with an interesting clue. She claimed to have seen a blue car, similar to Katrina's, parked on a bridge over Rock River on the night she vanished. The trunk was open, and someone was kneeling behind it. Although the witness couldn't describe the person's gender or race, her tip led the police to suspect that Katrina might have been a victim of foul play and ended up in the river. However, they still needed concrete evidence to support this theory. The police continued to investigate Katrina's disappearance, looking into potential motives and suspects. Despite seeming to have a happy marriage, her husband Todd was still a person of interest. As the authorities knew that hidden conflicts or secrets can exist in any relationship, their inquiry led them to a teenager in town who had previously shown an unhealthy obsession with Katrina. Earlier in the year, Katrina had confided in friends about the boy's behavior, including allegations of voyeurism, such as spying on her through her bedroom window. This had made Katrina increasingly anxious at the time. Although the boy's activities had stopped when he left for college, the police wondered if he might have returned and resumed stalking Katrina. They devoted significant resources to finding him. 3 days into the search, crucial clues were discovered on Katrina's cell phone, which was being examined at the crime lab. The phone proved to be a crucial source of evidence for the investigators. By examining Katrina's cell phone records, they uncovered a wealth of information, including her text messages, call logs, pictures, videos, and GPS location data. This information enabled the police to reconstruct a more accurate timeline of Katrina's activities. The investigation revealed that Katrina was having an affair with a co-worker, Guy Gabriel. Initially, they had met after work and developed a connection that eventually turned romantic. However, a background check on Guy Gabriel exposed a troubling history of domestic violence. Additionally, the detectives found text messages in which Guy Gabriel demanded that Katrina leave her husband Todd for him. Given Guy Gabriel's violent past and his messages to Katrina, he became the top suspect in her disappearance. The police suspected that Guy Gabriel might have reacted violently towards Katrina because she refused to leave her husband for him. When Katrina's family discovered her affair with Guy, they were shocked and disbelieving. The seemingly perfect couple, Katrina and Todd, had hidden a dark secret. The news of Katrina's infidelity devastated Todd, who was unaware of the affair until the police investigation. Guy Gabriel was questioned by the police at the station, and although he appeared nervous, he admitted to the affair, but denied any involvement in Katrina's disappearance. He claimed to have been at work on the night she went missing. During the investigation, the police uncovered an incident that had occurred 2 weeks before Katrina's disappearance. Witnesses reported that a black Volkswagen Jetta had sped through the parking lot of the auto shop where Katrina and Guy worked, causing a scene during lunchtime. A mysterious driver in a VW Jetta threw a stack of flyers out of the car's sunroof, scattering them among the employees gathered outside. The flyers contained a derogatory remark about Katrina and Guy Gabriel's relationship, but the identity of the driver remained unknown. Meanwhile, the police questioned Katrina's hairstylist, who shared that Katrina had confided in her about feeling unsafe and threatened. Katrina had even considered buying a gun for protection and had become paranoid about being followed. She had gone so far as to take her phone to a store to check for a tracking device, suspecting that someone was monitoring her movements. At the police garage, crime scene investigators searched Katrina's car for clues and used a special chemical called luminol to detect blood. They found a large amount of blood in the trunk. Meanwhile, a firefighter pulled a mysterious object from the water, which turned out to be a severely decomposed female body. The body was difficult to identify due to its condition. At the medical examiner's office, dental experts compared the body's teeth to Katrina Smith's dental records and confirmed that the body belonged to her. The autopsy revealed that Katrina's cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Katrina's family was devastated by the news, and her mother, Vicky, was in disbelief. The police cleared the teenage boy who had been allegedly stalking Katrina as a suspect after verifying his alibi. The police then turned their attention to Guy Gabriel, Katrina's boyfriend, outside of her marriage. Guy provided an alibi, claiming he was at work during the time of Katrina's disappearance and murder. His managers and co-workers corroborated his alibi, and the police cleared him as a suspect. Although Guy was no longer a suspect, the police asked for his perspective on who may have hurt Katrina. Guy revealed that Katrina's husband, Todd, exhibited controlling behavior and encouraged Katrina to leave her marriage. The police investigated Katrina's marriage and discovered several concerning details, including Katrina's desire to divorce Todd, her meeting with a divorce attorney, and her separation from Todd. The police suspected Todd of being behind the mysterious flyer incident at Katrina's workplace. Their suspicion grew stronger when they discovered that Todd had test-driven a black Jetta, similar to the car involved in the flyer incident, around the same time it occurred. When the police informed Katrina's family that Todd was the prime suspect in her murder and was already in custody, they were shocked and devastated. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was particularly affected, feeling physically ill at the thought that Todd could be responsible for her daughter's murder. The police also discovered that Todd's financial investment company was facing legal troubles, providing a potential motive for the crime. Katrina was the sole breadwinner for her family since Todd was unemployed. The police suspected that Todd might have motive to kill his wife, as he would gain access to their funds if she left him and their daughters. To gather evidence, the police obtained a search warrant for the couple's home. During the search, they found a baseball bat in the garage with brays of blood on it, which led them to believe it might be the murder weapon. The autopsy revealed that Katrina's injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma, suggesting a bat was used. A DNA test confirmed that the blood on the bat was Katrina's, linking the bat to the crime. The police also found a clean area under the car, which seemed suspicious. Further examination revealed that the bloodstains matched Katrina's DNA profile. 30 days after Katrina's murder, Todd was arrested and charged with her killing, bringing relief to her family. At his trial, the prosecution presented evidence that Katrina had recently visited a divorce attorney, indicating marital problems. On the night of the murder, Katrina had gone to Todd's house to do laundry for a job interview the next morning. The prosecution alleged that Katrina told Todd their marriage was over, triggering his violent reaction. They claimed that Todd grabbed a baseball bat, killed Katrina in the garage, and then disposed of her body by throwing it off a bridge at Rock River. The jury found Todd guilty and sentenced him to 55 years in prison. The case of Shauna Nelson. Heather Hodges and Ignacio Gose met at a university party where Ignacio's friendly and charming personality immediately caught Heather's eye. It was instant attraction for both of them, and they soon realized they had fallen in love. Heather was a vibrant person with an innocent charm. Her striking features, including pale skin, red lips, and dark hair, captivated Ignacio, who affectionately nicknamed her Snow White. When Ignacio asked Heather out on their first date, she was thrilled and shared the news with her roommates, who joined in her excitement. As their relationship grew stronger, Ignacio continued to shower Heather with affection, surprising her with her favorite flowers and coffee. His thoughtful gestures made Heather feel loved and valued. After graduating from the University of Northern Colorado, Ignacio decided to take their relationship to the next level, proposing to Heather and receiving a happy yes in response. Heather set one non-negotiable condition for their engagement. If Ignacio ever cheated on her, she would end their marriage instantly, no matter how sorry he was or how hard he tried to make things right. She made it clear that infidelity was a deal-breaker and she wouldn't tolerate it. Heather and Ignacio got married within a year, surrounded by loved ones on a joyful and beautiful day. After that, Ignacio became a police officer in Gray, Colorado, while Heather worked as a supervisor at the local credit union. Her colleagues and clients adored her for her exceptional ability to comfort them during difficult times. One co-worker even described her as wonderful in every way. After 5 years of marriage, Heather and Ignacio decided to have a child. They were overjoyed when Heather gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Victoria. As a mother, Heather's entire world centered around her daughter, and she felt immense happiness. Ignacio also turned out to be an exceptional father. From the outside, it seemed like Heather and Ignacio had the perfect life. In 1997, Heather's life was forever changed when her father passed away from a heart attack. Just days later, her mother was diagnosed with cancer. Heather took on the enormous responsibility of caring for her ailing mother, selflessly dedicating herself to her care. Her mother eventually passed away in 2003. Heather's husband, Ignacio, was a devoted and caring partner who helped take care of their daughter Victoria and managed household chores. After providing emotional support to Heather during her difficult time, Ignacio's focus shifted towards his co-worker, Shauna Nelson, a dispatcher at the Gray Police Department. Shauna was married to Ken, a deputy at the Wells County Sheriff's Office, and they had 2 children together, but their marriage was struggling. At first, Shauna and Ignacio's interaction was friendly, but it gradually became flirtatious. They started exchanging playful comments and compliments, which caught Ignacio's attention. Over time, Shauna captivated him, and his interest deepened. Ignacio spent more time with Shauna, and their connection evolved into a strong emotional bond. As they continued to see each other, their feelings intensified. Their playful flirting turned into passionate and intimate feelings. Despite being married to others, they found themselves powerless against their attraction. The affair between Ignacio and Shauna became the center of town gossip, but Heather remained unaware of her husband's infidelity. Everyone knew the situation, but no one had the courage to tell Heather the truth. As a result, Shauna and Ignacio's secret relationship grew stronger while Heather remained unaware. When Shauna discovered she was pregnant, she excitedly told Ignacio the news. However, Ignacio was not happy and started doubting whether he was the father of the baby, suspecting that it might be her husband Ken's instead. Shauna reassured Ignacio that Ken was not the father because he had a vasectomy after their second child. Knowing that he would face severe consequences if Heather found out, Ignacio became anxious. He didn't want the baby and frantically searched for a solution with Shauna's consent. Heather had no idea that her husband, Ignacio, was having an affair with Shauna. Shauna, however, grew tired of being secretive and decided to confront Heather. One day, Shauna, accompanied by her friend Michelle, followed Heather to the grocery store. Shauna and Michelle discreetly trailed Heather around the store, watching her every move. Meanwhile, Heather, unaware of their presence, chatted with a friend on her phone. Eventually, Shauna approached Heather and hurled insults and accusations at her. The encounter left Heather deeply disturbed. Determined to get answers, Heather confronted Ignacio about the incident. She knew Shauna from his work Christmas parties and was aware that Shauna was his co-worker at the police department. When Heather asked Ignacio why Shauna, who had always been friendly towards her, would suddenly attack her in the grocery store, Ignacio explained that Shauna had romantic feelings for him, but reassured Heather that she had nothing to worry about. Ignacio promised Heather that he would tell Shauna to leave her alone. He followed through on his promise and confronted Shauna, telling her to stop bothering Heather. However, Shauna became very angry with him and refused to back off. Despite Ignacio's efforts, Shauna continued to harass Heather. One day, Shauna even showed up at Heather and Ignacio's house, demanding to speak with Ignacio. This made Heather suspicious of Ignacio's true intentions. Unbeknownst to Heather, Shauna had confided in a co-worker at the county dispatch center about her affair with Ignacio, revealing her strong feelings for him. Shauna expressed frustration that Heather, Ignacio's wife, was standing in the way of their relationship. According to the co-worker, Shauna also mentioned that she would relieve her frustrations by shooting at targets at the shooting range, imagining that the targets were Heather. Shauna had been having an affair with Ignacio for over a year, but her husband, Ken, remained unaware of the situation until he discovered Shauna's journal, which detailed her relationship with Ignacio. After discovering Shauna's infidelity, Ken chose to stay in the relationship for the sake of their children. Meanwhile, Shauna was aware that Ignacio was having multiple affairs, which motivated her to maintain control over him. She threatened to expose his secrets to Heather if he ever left her. Shauna's obsession with Ignacio intensified, and in July 2005, she got a tattoo of his family name on her leg to solidify her connection to him. Shauna's behavior became increasingly unhealthy, crossing into stalking territory. If Ignacio and Heather took their daughter Victoria out, Shauna and her family would coincidentally appear at the same restaurant. Despite recognizing Shauna's concerning behavior, Ignacio continued their affair. When Shauna became pregnant with Ignacio's second child, she insisted on keeping the baby, refusing to consider termination. Shauna had a son named Christian with her co-worker Oso in March 2006, while still married to Ken. To keep the truth from Oso's wife, Ken offered to raise Christian as his own if Shauna stayed married to him. Shauna agreed to this arrangement. Later that summer, a woman approached Heather, Oso's wife, with surprising news. Shauna had given birth to Oso's baby. Heather was stunned and demanded answers from Oso when she got home. However, Oso lied to her, trying to conceal his affair with Shauna. But one night in December 2006, Heather caught Oso in the act. She waited up for him to return and confronted him as soon as he walked in. This time, Oso decided to be honest with Heather. He confessed to being out with Shauna that night and revealed that their affair had been going on for years. He also told her about Shauna's 2 pregnancies, including her recent birth of his son, Christian. Heather's husband Ignacio confessed to having an affair with Shauna, and Heather kicked him out of the house. However, the next day, she called him back because she didn't want to break up their family and wanted to keep their marriage intact. Heather told Ignacio she loved him and knew he loved her back, but she wasn't ready to forgive him immediately. Instead, she gave him several conditions to fulfill before considering taking him back. These conditions included getting an STD test, seeking counseling, giving up his parental rights to Shauna's baby, and ending his relationship with Shauna. Ignacio agreed to all the conditions and ended his affair with Shauna. However, Shauna was furious and began harassing Heather, even sending her a text message with a picture of her and Ignacio's son, saying, "Flesh and blood." Shauna threatened to sue Ignacio for child support, and her harassment became so bad that Ignacio and Heather had to take precautions to protect their family and property. They even had to get a lawyer to send Shauna a formal notice to stop harassing them. Despite the warnings, Shauna continued to harass Heather through text messages, emails, and voicemails. On January 23, 2007, Shauna dressed in black, wore a Halloween mask, and brandished a gun. She approached Heather as she left work and shot her twice in the head at point-blank range, execution style. Heather died at the scene, and Shauna was later caught and charged with her murder. Ignacio rushed to Heather's trauma room, only to be met by a doctor with devastating news: Heather had passed away. This shattered Ignacio, who now had to break the heart-wrenching news to their 9-year-old daughter, Victoria. Telling Victoria that her mother was gone was the most difficult task Ignacio had ever faced. He remembered spending a long time holding and comforting her as they both cried uncontrollably. Meanwhile, at the crime scene, witnesses were sharing their accounts of the murder with the police. One witness described the shooter as suddenly appearing and fleeing in a red pickup truck. Another thought the shooter might have been a woman, judging by the way they ran. The investigation had already raised one name in connection with Heather's harassment: Shauna Nelson, who was aware of Oso's affair. Shauna, a police dispatcher, was suspected of being involved in Heather's shooting. The police were familiar with her and her husband Ken, a police officer, and knew that Ken owned a car similar to the one driven by the shooter. As evidence mounted against Shauna, the police issued an all-points bulletin, APB, for her and the red pickup truck she was believed to be driving. Ken, who was on patrol that night, heard the APB on his radio and immediately started searching for his wife. Within 20 minutes, he found her driving his vehicle near their home. Shauna claimed she had been running errands, but Ken was suspicious because she wasn't wearing shoes despite the cold January weather in Colorado. What really caught Ken's attention, however, was that Shauna was wearing his socks, underwear, and pants. He stopped her, called for backup, and requested assistance. Soon, police officers arrived and took Shauna into custody. The authorities then began investigating to determine if she was involved in Heather's murder. Shauna's DNA was found on a pair of shoes discovered near the crime scene, about 1,000 feet away. Additionally, investigators found two .42 caliber Glock Model 22 shell casings in the parking lot where Heather was shot. This was significant because Ken, Shauna's partner, used the same type of gun for work. These findings strengthened the case against Shauna. A Halloween mask similar to the one worn by the shooter was found hidden under the seat of Ken's red pickup truck. At Shauna's home, investigators found a fully filled bathtub, which led some to suspect she was preparing to wash away any potential blood evidence. After Shauna's arrest, her clothing and hands were tested for gunshot residue. The results were positive, further implicating her in the crime. With strong evidence against her, Shauna was charged with first-degree murder. Although the shell casings matched the weapon used to kill Heather, the judge sentenced her appropriately. However, there was a surprising twist. Ken Nelson, Shauna's husband, handed over his service weapon to his supervisor, but the actual gun used in the murder was never found. Despite this, Ken was charged with tampering with evidence and being an accessory to first-degree murder because he stopped Shauna after the murder but failed to detain her. During her interrogation, Shauna claimed she had gone out to run errands and had accidentally put on her husband's dirty clothes from the laundry basket. She said that when she arrived at the store, she realized she had forgotten her wallet and drove back home. When questioned about Heather's murder, Shauna denied any involvement or knowledge of the crime. The police also extensively questioned Ignacio, but he was cleared of all suspicion. In February 2008, Shauna's trial began for Heather Garris's murder. Shauna pleaded not guilty to the charges. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Shauna had a history of affairs with married officers, including Ignacio. Shauna's motive for killing Heather Garris, according to the prosecution, was her obsession with Ignacio. A key witness in the case was Michelle Moore, Shauna's former best friend, who often accompanied her when she would publicly bully Heather Garris. In exchange for a lighter sentence, Michelle agreed to cooperate with the state and testify against Shauna. Michelle testified against Shauna, describing how much Shauna despised Heather Garris and even admitting to helping plan her murder. Shauna took the stand to defend herself, denying the allegations. She vehemently denied telling anyone that she fantasized about killing Heather or picturing her during target practice. Shauna also denied being involved in Heather's death, claiming she was on her way to a liquor store at the time of the shooting. During her testimony, she suggested an alternative theory, accusing her best friend Michelle of being obsessed with her and wanting to make her happy by eliminating Heather. However, when Michelle was questioned as a witness, she rejected Shauna's allegations. The prosecution argued that Shauna wore her husband's clothing during the shooting to frame him for the crime. According to the prosecution, by killing Heather, Shauna's husband's wife, and Ken, her own husband, Shauna and Ignacio would be free to be together. After deliberating for just 5 hours, the jury delivered a verdict. Shauna Nelson was guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sternly addressed Shauna, declaring that she deserved every day of her sentence. Shauna's former best friend, Michelle Moore, was sentenced to 9 years in prison for her role in planning Heather's murder. Following Shauna's conviction, Ken Nelson, her husband and a police officer, resigned from the force and filed for divorce. He moved out of state with their children, including Shauna's son Christian, whom she had with Ignacio. However, Ken later returned to Colorado, hoping that one day the children could visit Shauna in prison. Despite the circumstances, Ken always believed that Shauna was a loving and dedicated mother. The charges against him were eventually dropped. Heather's loved ones are relieved that Shauna is behind bars, feeling that justice has been served, and they hope she reflects on the pain she caused Heather every day for the rest of her life. Shauna's selfish behavior resulted in Heather being separated from her family, which meant Victoria, Heather's daughter, was deprived of her mother. Tragically, in 2015, 17-year-old Victoria died in a car accident when she lost control of her vehicle and hit a tree. The case of Sherri Papini. Keith and Sherri Papini first met in middle school, when Keith was in 7th grade and Sherri was in 8th. They shared their first kiss with each other. Their friendship flourished quickly, and they remained close throughout their teenage years. However, as they grew older, they drifted apart and went their separate ways. Years later, Sherri married another man in 2006, but the marriage was short-lived, lasting only 2 years. After her divorce, Sherri found herself single again. Then, by chance, she ran into Keith, and the spark between them was immediately rekindled. The time they had spent apart had given them both personal growth and maturity, and they realized how much they had missed each other. Keith and Sherri decided to give their love a second chance, and they started dating. As they spent more time together, their connection grew stronger every day. Within a year of reuniting, they knew they were meant to be together. They got married in 2009 and had 2 children, settling down in Redding, California. Sherri used to work in telecommunications, but after having children, she became a stay-at-home mom. Keith continued to work at Best Buy as a member of the Geek Squad. The Papini family seemed to have a perfect life from the outside. However, on November 2, 2016, Keith's world was turned upside down when he came home to find his wife, Sherri, missing. It was unusual for her not to be there, as she was always home when he returned from work. At first, Keith thought she might have gone for a walk, but as time passed and she didn't come back, he grew increasingly worried. Keith called the daycare center their children attended to see if Sherri had picked them up. But the school secretary told him she hadn't. This heightened Keith's concern, and he decided to use the Find My iPhone app on his phone to track her location. The app showed that her phone was at the end of their driveway. Alarmed, Keith rushed outside to search the area and found Sherri's phone lying on the ground, with her headphones nearby. When Keith found Sherri's phone and headphones at the end of the driveway, he made a disturbing discovery. There were strands of hair entangled in the headphones. He immediately contacted the authorities at the Shasta County Sheriff's Office, who took Sherri's disappearance seriously and brought in the FBI right from the start. Keith was desperate to find Sherri and get her back safely. To do this, he knew it was crucial to get her name and face out to the public. So he spoke to the media, hoping to generate support and assistance in finding her. The media played a huge role in spreading the story of Sherri's disappearance, and her beauty, blonde hair, and blue eyes made her case especially captivating to the public. As a result, news channels eagerly covered every detail of the story. After Sherri went missing and it became public, the police received many tips, but none of them led to finding her. As they continued to investigate, they looked at Sherri's phone for clues. They found a heated text conversation between Sherri and her husband Keith from a few months earlier, which made the police suspicious of Keith's possible involvement. Despite this, Keith was cooperative and offered to take a lie detector test to clear his name. He passed the test. In addition to the argument with Keith, the police found texts on Sherri's phone from men using fake female names. It seemed like Sherri was planning to leave Keith. On November 10, 2016, the police tracked down one of these men and questioned him about Sherri's disappearance. The man claimed to have met Sherri 5 years prior at a restaurant during a work conference she was attending. Although he said he didn't know her current whereabouts, he shared some information about her relationship with her husband Keith. According to the man, Sherri did not respect Keith and was even fearful of him. He alleged that Keith was violent and abusive, often locking Sherri up in their home. After a tip from a man who knew Sherri, claiming that her husband Keith was abusive, the police launched an investigation. However, after speaking with friends and neighbors, they found no evidence to support the claims of Keith's violence. Several days into Sherri's disappearance, on November 24, 2016, the police received a call at 4:32 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning. The caller reported a woman in distress on the side of I-5. The police rushed to the scene and found a woman bound with chains and zip ties. It took a moment for the officers to realize Sherri Papini, who had been missing for days. Relieved to find her alive, they carefully freed her from the restraints and took her to the hospital for medical attention. When Sherri arrived at the hospital, it was clear that she had been through a traumatic experience. Her body was covered in bruises, her hair was noticeably shorter, and she had a burn mark on her arm, as well as a bad rash. She had also lost a significant amount of weight, weighing in at only 87 pounds. While Sherri was recovering at Woodland Memorial Hospital, the police tried to interview her, but she was too emotional to provide any information. The only condition under which she would cooperate was if her husband Keith was present in the room. With Keith by her side, Sherri recounted the terrifying incident. She said she was out jogging when a dark-colored SUV, driven by two women, approached her. She got out of the vehicle, pointed a gun at her, while Sherri Papini stayed in the car. Sherri was forced into the back of the SUV against her will. Before getting into the vehicle, Sherri had the presence of mind to leave behind her phone and headphones on the driveway, along with some strands of her hair. She did this intentionally, hoping that Keith would find them and realize something was wrong. Sherri shared the details of her abduction with the police and her husband Keith. During the journey, she kept dozing off in the back of the SUV, making it difficult for her to keep track of time. The two women had wrapped something around her face, preventing her from seeing her surroundings. They told her that she was being kidnapped because a man wanted to buy her and she was being taken to meet him. However, they refused to reveal the man's identity or location. Sherri was terrified and worried about her fate, unsure of where she was being taken or what would happen to her during her captivity. She also claimed to have been physically abused by one of the women, who frequently hit her, leaving her with multiple injuries. Sherri claimed that her captors branded her right shoulder with the word Exodus to attract a buyer, who was allegedly a police officer. She also said that her captors constantly played mariachi music, which she found disorienting and unsettling. This music added to the oppressive atmosphere of her captivity, making her feel more isolated. Sherri was held in a single room with a boarded-up window. She was chained in a closet that served as a bathroom with a bucket for sanitation purposes. About 3 weeks into her captivity, Sherri heard a gunshot. After that, she had been with her disappeared, leaving Sherri to wonder if she had been killed. Sherri Papini, who had been quiet until now, took control of the situation. She instructed Sherri to get into a car, and they drove along I-5. Without warning, the car stopped, leaving Sherri startled and disoriented. She looked around, trying to understand what was happening. The younger woman then told Sherri to get out of the car. Confused and unsure, Sherri cautiously did as she was told. As Sherri exited the car, she felt a mix of fear and excitement. Was this her chance to escape? Or was she being led into an even more dangerous situation? She was left with more questions than answers, feeling uncertain and scared. After being found safe on the side of I-5, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office held a press conference to announce Sherri's return. During the conference, the police reported that Sherri had been abducted by 2 Hispanic women, which sparked widespread concern among the public. However, this news brought unintended consequences. Following the press conference, a wave of racism erupted, targeting individuals of Spanish descent. The reporting of Sherri's abduction had fueled public fear and anxiety, leading some to unfairly blame individuals associated with the Hispanic community. After being abducted, Sherri returned home and began attending therapy sessions to cope with her trauma. As a California resident, she was eligible for the Victims' Compensation Fund, which uses public funds to help pay for victims' therapy. In the aftermath, she became withdrawn, spending more time at home and avoiding social outings. 1 year into the investigation, police released a composite sketch of 2 Hispanic women believed to be involved in the crime. Despite this development, no new leads emerged. The police also revealed that they had found male DNA on Sherri's underwear, which did not match her husband Keith's DNA. 2 years passed with no matches on the male DNA, and the case remained unsolved. However, in 2020, a long-awaited breakthrough finally occurred. The police working on Sherri's case decided to try a new approach to find the owner of the unknown DNA. They used a technique called familial DNA, which compares the DNA profile to potential relatives of the donor. This method is commonly used in criminal investigations to analyze DNA evidence and identify possible family members of a suspect. By looking at specific genetic traits shared among family members, investigators can create a shorter list of potential suspects and explore possible family connections. In the Sherri Papini case, the police were surprised to discover that the DNA found in her underwear matched a close relative of James Ray's, her ex-boyfriend. This new information raised many questions and became a crucial moment in the investigation. The police suspected Sherri's ex-boyfriend, James Ray's, of being involved in her abduction. To investigate, they collected a soda bottle from his trash in June 2020 and sent it to a forensic lab for DNA testing. A month later, the lab results showed a match between James's DNA and the DNA found on Sherri's underwear the day she was discovered. With this new evidence, the police went to James's home in Costa Mesa, California, where he worked at a sports shop, to ask him about Sherri's case. James told the police that he had dated Sherri about 10 years prior, and the last time he saw her was a year after they broke up. He claimed to have only heard about her disappearance and safe return through rumors. During the police interview, James initially denied any involvement in Sherri's kidnapping. However, as the conversation progressed, he revealed that he was still close friends with Sherri despite their breakup 10 years prior. Although James admitted to playing a role in her disappearance, he claimed he didn't kidnap her. Instead, he insisted he was merely assisting a friend in need. James reported to the police that Sherri reached out to him for help, claiming she needed to escape her abusive husband, Keith. On November 2, 2016, James told police that a friend had lent him a car, which he used the next day to pick up Sherri. According to James, Sherri hid in the back seat of the car, lying down during the drive to Costa Mesa. During her stay at James's house, Sherri mostly stayed in her room, only coming out to help with chores like cleaning and cooking. She even boarded up the bedroom window, as she wanted to feel secure with the door closed. James noticed that Sherri was intentionally trying to lose weight by barely eating. Sherri asked James to help her harm herself, including hitting herself to create bruises. James was uncomfortable with this request, but he still agreed to help her, even going so far as to shoot a hockey puck off her knee at her request. Despite his reservations, James participated in these harmful activities with Sherri. James confessed to branding Sherri with the word Exodus on her right shoulder using a wood-burning tool they had bought from Hobby Lobby. Before Sherri left his house, she asked James to get chains and zip ties, which he used to bind her securely before driving her to Redding, California. During the drive, Sherri told James to stop the car, which he did, and she escaped. When questioned by the police, James denied knowing anything about the 2 Hispanic women Sherri claimed had abducted her. However, when the police searched James's house, they were shocked to find that several rooms matched the descriptions Sherri had given of the place where she was held captive. Specifically, James' bedroom and closet exactly matched a drawing Sherri had made for the police, detailing the layout of the rooms she had been confined to. The police discovered a striking similarity between a table at James's house and the one Sherri described in her initial interviews. They decided to bring Sherri and Keith in for another interview at the police station. The police had accumulated substantial evidence that led them to believe Sherri had faked her own abduction. They intended to confront her with their findings during the interview. Before revealing the truth, they asked Sherri if she wanted Keith to leave the room. Sherri remained silent. The police then decided to leave the couple alone for a few minutes. During this time, Sherri approached Keith and confessed that she didn't want the police to find the Hispanic woman who had supposedly abducted her. She felt indebted to this woman for sparing her life. Sherri refused to press charges against the woman who attacked her. Keith listened to her reasons, but he was skeptical and worried. Sherri's explanation didn't make sense to him, and he was starting to get scared. He pointed out that even if Sherri didn't want to press charges, the attacker would still face consequences for her actions. The police re-entered the interview room with an update. They had found a familial DNA match for the male DNA on Sherri's clothing, and it led them to James Reyes, Sherri's ex-boyfriend. When Keith heard the name, he had a visceral reaction. He knew James as Sherri's ex. The police told Sherri and Keith that James Reyes, Sherri's ex-boyfriend, had passed a lie detector test. They suspected that Sherri had faked her own kidnapping and claimed to have evidence to support James's version of events. The police told Sherri that they believed her significant weight loss during her disappearance was intentional, as she had chosen to eat very little. They also suggested that the rash on her arm was caused by the cleaning products she had used at James's house. Furthermore, the police alleged that James had used a wooden tool bought from Hobby Lobby to brand Sherri. They also claimed that Sherri's broken nose was self-inflicted, caused by hitting herself with a hockey stick. Despite the mounting evidence against her, Sherri remained calm and pretended not to understand what the police were talking about. Sherri Papini claimed to have not seen her ex-boyfriend James in years, stating she last saw him at his brother's funeral in Southern California. However, the police knew she was lying because James had provided them with information about her disappearance that only someone close to her would know. On March 3, 2022, the FBI arrested Sherri on charges of lying to federal agents and faking her own abduction. 6 weeks later, she agreed to a plea deal, admitting to orchestrating her kidnapping. Sherri's lawyers requested a sentence of 1 month in prison, followed by 7 months of house arrest. However, the prosecution recommended an 18-month sentence. In September 2022, the judge sentenced Sherri to 18 months in prison and ordered her to pay a $300,000 fine. The judge doubted that Sherri would ever be able to pay the fine, saying it would take winning the lottery. During the sentencing, the judge called Sherri a manipulator and habitual liar, stating that he had no doubt she would have continued lying if she hadn't been caught. The judge told Sherri that she needed to be punished to stop others from committing similar crimes. Sherri had taken advantage of many resources, including money meant for victims, Social Security disability payments, and a GoFundMe account set up after her fake kidnapping. The judge wanted to deter others from committing similar crimes by punishing Sherri. She spoke at her sentencing hearing, expressing regret and apologizing to those who had suffered because of her actions. Sherri acknowledged her guilt, saying she was responsible for lying and bringing shame to herself and those around her. In August 2023, Sherri was released from prison and moved to a halfway house. Sherri and her husband Keith separated on the day of her arrest in March 2022. After Sherri pleaded guilty, Keith filed for divorce the next month and sought full custody of their children. The case of Rebecca Bleefnick. Rebecca and Tim, who met at Quincy University, were the epitome of a perfect couple. Rebecca was a biology major and a tennis player, while Tim was a star football player. 2 years after graduating, the practical couple decided to tie the knot. Instead of splurging on an engagement ring and a lavish honeymoon, they chose to save their money. Although Rebecca had a genuine interest in medicine and had dreamed of becoming a doctor, she decided to pursue motherhood instead. Her dream came true when she and Tim had 3 sons. Tim was known for his charisma and ability to entertain. In 2008, he auditioned for American Gladiators, making it to the final round. Years later, in 2019, he received an invitation from the producers of Family Feud to participate in the show with his family. Rebecca's nursing school commitments prevented her from joining Tim on the TV show Family Feud. Undeterred, Tim assembled a team of family members, including his parents and brothers. The show's format features 2 teams competing to guess the most popular responses to survey questions from 100 people. Despite being unprepared, Tim's team performed well, earning points and ranking second on the scoreboard. They went on to participate in 3 episodes, winning a total of $20,000, which was divided equally among the family members. However, Tim did not share any of the winnings with his wife Rebecca. This decision highlights the strain on Tim and Rebecca's marriage, which began when Rebecca pursued a nursing career against Tim's wishes. Tim had expressed concerns about Rebecca's well-being and ability to manage stress, but Rebecca's friends believed Tim was opposed to her independence and autonomy. Rebecca's friends noticed that she was becoming increasingly unhappy in her marriage over time. At first, her marriage to Tim was relatively happy for about 5 years, but then Tim started to become more controlling and manipulative. Despite Rebecca's hard work in her nursing studies and job, Tim didn't pull his weight at home, leaving Rebecca to handle most of the responsibilities. Rebecca realized that their marriage was struggling and wanted to fix it, so she suggested that they go to marriage counseling together. She believed that counseling could help them find solutions and improve their relationship. However, Tim refused to go, despite Rebecca's efforts to save their marriage. In January 2021, after 11 years of marriage, Tim suddenly filed for divorce, which caught Rebecca off guard. She had been committed to working through their issues, but Tim had already made up his mind. He moved out of their family home and into a new house across town, leaving Rebecca to pick up the pieces. Tim and Rebecca's divorce was extremely contentious. They were unable to agree on anything, and their communication broke down completely. The couple disputed several issues, including who would get custody of the children, how they would divide their property, and how much alimony one would pay the other. Things escalated to the point where Tim felt threatened and applied for a court order to protect himself from Rebecca, alleging that she was stalking and harassing him. Rebecca had a different view of the situation, accusing Tim of harassment. She shared her concerns with friends through text messages, describing incidents where Tim yelled at her, pushed her in front of their sons, and threw things. Rebecca feared Tim might do something drastic to take her children away, which alarmed her sister, who knew Rebecca's fears were valid and that she needed help to protect herself. Rebecca then filed for an order of protection against Tim, claiming he entered her home without permission and lied about their interactions. However, the judge denied both Rebecca and Tim's requests, instead ordering them to stay away from each other's homes, except during child custody exchanges. In February 2023, Tim told the police he wouldn't return a gun, calling Rebecca a derogatory name. At the time, Rebecca and Tim's 3 sons, aged 12, 10, and 5, were staying with Tim at his home, just a mile from Rebecca's residence. Their divorce was set to be finalized in just 1 week. Tim contacted Rebecca's father the next day, worried because he couldn't reach Rebecca, and she had failed to pick up the boys from school as planned. Given Rebecca's dedication as a mother, her father suspected something was seriously wrong. Concerned for Rebecca's safety, her father rushed to her house. When he arrived, he entered the house, calling out to Rebecca, but received no response. He went upstairs to her bedroom, where he found a disturbing scene. Rebecca lay on her back, covered in blood and gunshot wounds. After Rebecca's father discovered her body in the bathroom, detectives and forensic experts arrived at the house. They began by carefully examining the outside of the property, searching for clues. Their investigation revealed that the suspect had probably entered the house by forcing open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. The discovery led investigators to believe that the suspect used a patio chair to gain access to the house and climb up to the roof. By retracing the suspect's likely path, they went to Rebecca's bedroom, where they found the door had been violently kicked in or broken. The state of the door suggested to investigators that the suspect had forcibly entered the room, probably in search of Rebecca. Evidence indicated that Rebecca had tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect had pursued her and caught up. Ultimately, the suspect shot Rebecca inside the bathroom. During their search of the bathroom where Rebecca's body was found, investigators stumbled upon her cell phone. Upon examining Rebecca's phone, investigators found a 911 call dialed at 1:11 a.m. This led them to form a theory about the events of that night. They believe that as the suspect chased Rebecca through the house, she tried to call for help, but accidentally dialed a wrong number before she could try calling 911 again. The misdialed call at 1:11 a.m. suggested to investigators that the suspect had knocked the phone out of Rebecca's hand. They believed Rebecca was likely killed around this time. However, when police questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them remembered hearing any noise around 1:11 a.m., which raised suspicions among the investigators. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not a botched burglary, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind significant evidence. One notable discovery was a partial shoe print found near the point where the suspect entered the house. The shoe print discovered at the crime scene could be crucial in identifying the type of shoe worn by the suspect, including its make and model, as well as providing details about the size and shape of their feet. The presence of 8 9mm shell casings and small pieces of shredded plastic near Rebecca's body also provide significant leads for the investigators. Despite collecting these key pieces of evidence, the investigators were unsure how to interpret their findings. To gain more insight, they decided to send the evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. Specifically, they wanted to determine if any of Rebecca's personal belongings matched the evidence found at the crime scene. The investigation began when Rebecca's father found her lifeless body in the bathroom of her home. Upon arriving at the scene, investigators carefully examined the exterior of the house, leading them to identify how the perpetrator gained entry by prying open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. Here's what likely happened. The suspect used a patio chair to climb up to the roof and entered the house. The investigators retraced the suspect's steps and found that the bedroom door had been violently kicked in or broken, suggesting the suspect had forced their way in, probably looking for Rebecca. It seems Rebecca tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect caught up with her. Unfortunately, the suspect shot and killed Rebecca in the bathroom. The investigators found Rebecca's phone near her body and examined it. They discovered that she had dialed 911, but mistakenly entered an extra digit, 91126, at 1:11 a.m. This discovery helped the investigators piece together the events. They believe Rebecca was desperately trying to call for help as the suspect chased her through the house, but she accidentally dialed the wrong number. Before she could try calling 911 again, the suspect likely knocked the phone out of her hand. The timing of the misdialed call at 1:11 a.m. led investigators to believe that Rebecca's murder likely occurred around that time. However, when they questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them reported hearing any suspicious noises, which was surprising given the fact that she had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not the result of a burglary gone wrong, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind a significant amount of evidence. One crucial discovery was a partial shoe print near the point of entry, which could help identify the brand and model of the shoe, as well as the size and shape of the suspect's foot. The crime scene also yielded 8 9mm shell casings, and small pieces of shredded plastic were found scattered near Rebecca's body. After gathering all the evidence, the investigators were unsure what to make of their findings, so they decided to send the CED evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. The detectives wanted to determine if any of the evidence found at the crime scene matched Rebecca's belongings. A neighbor had installed a security camera on the side of their house after their car was broken into a year earlier. The camera was directed towards the neighbor's driveway, which shared a boundary with Rebecca's home, and was set to turn on and alert the neighbor whenever it detected movement. Although the camera didn't capture anything significant on the night of Rebecca's death, it did record something unusual the previous day at 1:05 a.m. The footage showed a person walking down the driveway towards the back of Rebecca's house, a potentially crucial discovery in the case. About 48 minutes after the initial sighting, the same individual was seen walking in the opposite direction. Interestingly, Rebecca's neighbor had captured a similar incident on their camera about a week prior, on February 14th. After reviewing their security footage, Rebecca's neighbors noticed a suspicious dark-clad figure lurking around her house on Valentine's Day, prompting them to alert her immediately. Upon learning about the mysterious figure, Rebecca became increasingly paranoid. Although she claimed not to have seen anyone on her property, she had heard unsettling voices in her backyard the previous night, which frightened her. Based on the security camera footage, the police expanded their search to neighboring houses to gather more evidence of the dark-clad individual. Their search led them to a house near the Quinney bus barn, where they found footage of a person riding a bike, dressed in dark clothing, heading towards Rebecca's house. These videos confirmed the description of the mysterious person seen in the original driveway footage, providing a clear consistency in the suspect's appearance. After analyzing the recorded times of the videos, detectives suspected that the person on the bike was the same individual seen in Rebecca's driveway footage. Although Rebecca's neighbor's security camera didn't capture footage of the mysterious person on the night of her murder, officers found footage of someone on a bike riding towards Rebecca's house just before and after the incident. This person matched the description of the individual seen lurking in Rebecca's driveway in the days leading up to her murder. While the video evidence was helpful in the investigation, its poor quality limited the information it provided. The detectives couldn't identify the person in the video due to the grainy image, making it difficult to determine their gender. However, they did notice one distinctive feature. The bike had no reflectors on its wheels. When Rebecca's sister heard that she was murdered, only one person came to mind as a suspect: Rebecca's estranged husband, Tim. Rebecca's sister, who had a first-hand account of the contentious divorce between Rebecca and Tim, shared this information with the detectives working on her sister's case. The detectives suspected Tim of murdering Rebecca, especially since her murder happened just a week before their divorce was due to be finalized. During the investigation, they made a crucial discovery: a bike with no reflectors on its wheels, similar to the one seen on security footage, was found just a block from Tim's house. This discovery increased the suspicion surrounding Tim, leading the detectives to obtain a search warrant for his home. When the police executed the warrant, Tim cooperated fully, standing outside his home with the officers as they searched his belongings. On March 13, 2023, 2 weeks after Rebecca's murder, Tim was arrested and charged with her murder. When his mugshot was released, Rebecca's family and friends were shocked by his appearance. which was very different from the clean-cut man they had known. Tim's friends and family were shocked by his disheveled appearance, which they attributed to the emotional toll of his recent divorce. His once neat and tidy hair was now unkempt, and his clothes were messy. They speculated that the divorce had affected not only his physical appearance, but also his mental well-being. However, Tim had a surprising explanation for his changed look. He revealed that he was growing his hair out to support a charity campaign for cancer research. Despite this, a viral video clip showed Tim's appearance on Family Feud, where he made a bizarre statement about regretting his marriage, which took on a disturbing tone after he was arrested for murdering his wife. Many people believed that Tim's comment on Family Feud was a strange and unsettling prediction of what would eventually happen. They thought it showed that he had hidden feelings about his wife and was a sign that something bad was happening in their relationship. When the police looked into Tim's phone, they found that he had made a fake Facebook account under the name John Smith. During their investigation, they discovered that Tim had been searching for a specific type of bicycle on Facebook, a blue Schwinn bike with no reflectors on the wheels. This was an important discovery because it matched the description of a bike that was found abandoned just 1 block away from Tim's house. Despite having strong evidence against Tim, the detectives faced a significant obstacle when they arrested him. Tim was held in jail without the possibility of bail, but he requested a quick trial, which is his right under the law. Prosecutors were required to bring the matter to trial within 90 days of Tim's arrest. The prosecution faced a significant challenge in convincing a jury, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Tim murdered Rebecca due to the absence of a confession or DNA evidence. Juries typically look for these 2 key elements in criminal cases. To prove Tim's guilt in the murder of his wife Rebecca, the prosecution faced a significant challenge. Exactly 3 months after Rebecca's tragic murder in her home, Tim's trial began on May 23, 2023. During the trial, the prosecution presented several key pieces of evidence found at the crime scene. One notable piece of evidence was the shredded plastic fragments discovered around Rebecca's body. The prosecution argued that these fragments came from an Al's grocery bag. Further investigation revealed that similar bags were found in Tim's house. The prosecution alleged that Tim used these bags as a makeshift silencer when he shot his estranged wife multiple times. They claimed that the bags were used to muffle the sound of the gunfire, preventing it from being heard by others. The prosecution also presented DNA evidence, suggesting that Tim left behind DNA while using the Aldi bags. An expert testified that it was highly likely Tim contributed to the DNA found, and that his DNA could not be ruled out as a match for the DNA found under Rebecca's fingernails. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting that a crowbar found in Tim's basement might have been used to force open the window at the victim's house on the night of the murder. Although an expert testified that there were microscopic similarities between the crowbar and the window's pry mark, she couldn't conclusively say that the crowbar was involved. To build a stronger case, the prosecution presented records of several searches made on Tim's phone, including how to open my door with a crowbar, how to make a homemade pistol silencer, how to clean gunpowder off your hands, and average police response time in Quinney. The prosecution's expert witness testified that she compared the shell casings found at the crime scene to those found at Tim's house during the investigation. Her analysis revealed that 27 of the casings from Tim's home were fired from the same 9mm weapon used to kill Rebecca. When investigators searched Tim's house, they didn't find Rebecca's 9mm gun, which he had refused to return to her. Tim claimed he hadn't seen the gun in months before Rebecca's murder. During the trial, the defense had the opportunity to call witnesses, but chose not to. After the 6-day trial, the jury took 4 hours to reach a guilty verdict, and Tim was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Despite claiming innocence and planning to appeal, Tim is behind bars, and Rebecca's family believes justice has been served. During the sentencing hearing, Rebecca's family read impact statements. One of her sisters addressed Tim, telling him how his actions affected his son's well-being. She stressed that his choices were causing his sons to suffer. Rebecca's sister vowed to keep her memory alive for her 3 sons, even after her passing. The case of Dalia Dippolito. On a sunny afternoon in Bon Beach, Florida, a man named Muhammad visited the local police department with a shocking story. He claimed that a woman, whom he knew only as Delilah, had approached him with an unusual and disturbing request. Muhammad alleged that Delilah had offered to hire him to commit a murder. While his story seemed plausible, Muhammad failed to provide one crucial detail: Delilah's last name. Despite this limitation, the Bon Beach Police Department took Muhammad's claim seriously and launched an investigation. The detectives were tasked with identifying the mysterious Delilah and determining who her husband was. To gather more information, they decided to use Muhammad as bait to set up a meeting with Delilah. They chose a local mobile gas station as the meeting location, given Muhammad's statement that Delilah lived nearby. At the designated meeting spot, the police set up several surveillance vehicles to monitor the encounter, hoping to gather evidence and piece together the puzzle surrounding Delilah's identity and motives. Before the woman arrived, the detectives briefed Muhammad on what to say to her. They secretly fitted him with a wire and recorder, allowing them to listen in on their conversation as it happened. As they continued to monitor the mobile gas station, the detectives focused on the interaction between Muhammad and a woman named Delilah. What surprised them was Delilah's appearance, which didn't fit the typical profile of someone who would want her husband killed. Delilah, an attractive woman wearing a skirt and tank top, got into the car with Muhammad. Muhammad, pretending to be hesitant, asked if it was worth having someone killed. Delilah replied that she couldn't divorce her husband because she feared he would retaliate if she tried to leave him and divide their assets. The woman told Muhammad that after her husband's murder, she intended to create an alibi by going to a different location, such as Boca Raton. Muhammad then asked her if anyone would suspect her of involvement in her husband's death, and she confidently replied that no one would accuse her. The detectives were stunned by the woman's casual tone as she discussed hiring a hitman to kill her husband. As they continued to listen, they were horrified by the woman's nonchalant attitude, which made it seem like she was discussing a routine business deal rather than arranging for someone's murder. At one point, she even showed Muhammad photos of her husband, which further revealed her callous disregard for human life. During the conversation, the woman made a stunning admission to Muhammad, revealing that she planned to pay a hitman to kill her husband. This confession was a crucial breakthrough for the detective, as it confirmed the woman's involvement in soliciting a murder. However, the detective knew that to build a stronger case, they needed to gather more evidence. The woman told Muhammad that she would withdraw $1,000 in cash and hand it over to the hitman later. After discussing the plan with Muhammad, the woman left the mobile gas station and drove home. The detectives followed her to gather information about her address. A records check revealed that the address belonged to Dalia Doe, not Delilah as they had initially thought. With this new information, the detectives ran a background check on the vehicle Dalia used to meet Muhammad at the gas station. This allowed them to obtain the registered owner's name, which was her husband, Mike Doe. To their friends, Mike and Dalia seemed like a loving and happy couple. The two had met when Mike was browsing the internet at work, looking for something to do when he was feeling bored. Mike found a website that offered escort services and decided to hire one. This decision would have a profound impact on his life. When the escort arrived, Mike was immediately drawn to her physical attractiveness. He thought she was exceptionally beautiful, and he felt an undeniable attraction between them. As they spent more time together, they quickly developed a strong connection. effortlessly engaging in friendly conversations over the next few days. Mike and Dalia's friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship after they spent a weekend together. They quickly realized their feelings for each other went beyond friendship. As a result, they became a committed couple. A few months into their relationship, they stumbled upon an engagement ring store, which led to a conversation about marriage, a topic they had previously discussed. Mike was drawn to the idea of spending his life with Dalia and decided to purchase a ring, symbolizing his commitment to their future together. Despite their relationship moving quickly, Mike was deeply happy and in love. Before meeting Dalia, Mike had a troubled past. In 2001, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison in Broward County, Florida, for grand theft, fraud, and false telephone sales. At the time, Mike was struggling with drug addiction and desperation for money, which he later acknowledged was no excuse for his mistakes. Mike served his 2-year sentence and was given 28 years of probation. The court granted Mike a lengthy probation period to give him time to pay back the significant amount of money he owed. However, when Mike returned home, he was unsure of how he would repay the debt. Determined to settle his debt, Mike found a job as a cook at a local restaurant, earning $350 weekly, which was insufficient to make a notable dent in the substantial amount he owed. To improve his financial situation and secure an early release from probation, Mike sought a better-paying job. A friend offered him an office job near his home, allowing him to transition from cooking to email marketing. As Mike and Dalia started dating, he eventually confided in her about his probation and the limitations it imposed. Mike explained that he required permission to leave the state while on probation. Dalia, who had a strong desire to travel, expressed her wish to explore the world with Mike. To help Mike become debt-free, Dalia offered to provide $91,000 if he paid the remaining balance, enabling them to clear the debt and start the life Dalia had envisioned. Dalia, a successful real estate agent, was financially stable and able to help her partner Mike pay off his debt and clear his name. Mike consulted his attorney to understand the process, and the attorney advised him to gather the necessary funds to be released from probation. To facilitate the payment, Dalia and Mike agreed that she would send the money from her Bank of America account to the attorney. Dalia informed Mike that she had transferred the funds, but when Mike followed up with the attorney, he was told that the payment had not been received. Mike waited a day and then asked Dalia about the status of the transfer. However, Dalia insisted that she had sent the money, leaving Mike frustrated and unsure about what was happening. Mike's concern grew, so he contacted his attorney again, only to be told that they still hadn't received anything. Dalia claimed to have sent the money to the attorney, but couldn't explain the delay. 2 days had passed since the transaction, but the attorney remained without the funds. Mike asked Dalia for proof of the transaction, needing the receipt to verify the details. However, Dalia suspected foul play, suggesting the attorney might have stolen the money. She vowed to find the missing sum, while Mike sought to move past the misunderstanding. Meanwhile, a supervisor at the Bon Beach Police Department reached out to Sergeant Whitey Jean for assistance. Sergeant Jean met with a detective working on Dalia Deo's case. The detective briefed Sergeant Whitey Jean on the case, revealing that Dalia wanted to hire someone to kill her husband. The detective explained that Dalia was waiting for a call from the would-be hitman and asked Sergeant Whitey Jean to pretend to be the hitman and arrange a meeting with her. Sergeant Whitey Jean agreed to help with the investigation and took on the role of the hitman. As the hitman, he contacted Dalia and demanded a $3,000 advance and the key to her house. The detective had requested the key as part of their plan to make Dalia believe the murder would happen at her home. However, Dalia was unhappy about the payment demand and called Muhammad, the informant, to express her concerns. During the call, the detective overheard Dalia's fears and worried that they might have scared her off. They feared that Dalia might change her mind and find someone else to commit the crime. On August 3, 2009, Dalia met with Sergeant Whitey Jean, who was posing as a hitman, in a CVS parking lot. However, Dalia didn't bring the agreed-upon payment, which led Sergeant Whitey Jean to warn her that if he had to wait until after the murder to get paid, she would need to give him $7,000 in cash up front. Sergeant Whitey Jean explained to Dalia that he would plan the staged break-in and murder of her husband Mike on Wednesday morning, taking advantage of the recent robberies in the area. He outlined his plan to make it look like a legitimate break-in, shooting Mike twice in the head to make it appear like a robbery gone wrong. Sergeant Whitey Jean also told Dalia that he would contact her a few days after the murder, as he knew the police would be closely monitoring her activities in the aftermath of the crime. Sergeant Whitey Jean cautioned Dalia that the delay was essential to avoid raising suspicions and maintaining the operation's secrecy. During their conversation, he gave her multiple opportunities to withdraw from the murder-for-hire plot. However, Dalia expressed her unwavering commitment, stating she was 5,000% certain about her decision to have her husband killed. Dalia provided Sergeant Whitey Jean with crucial details, revealing that her husband, Mike, followed a predictable morning routine, walking the dog at a specific time and leaving the house unlocked. This information was vital to the success of the plan. She also told the sergeant that she would create an alibi by going to the gym during the murder, ensuring her absence from the house when the crime would take place. The sergeant instructed Dalia to arrive at the gym by 6 a.m. and informed her that he would enter her home at 6:30 a.m. After speaking with Dalia, Sergeant Whitey Jean was taken aback by her extraordinary cruelty, having encountered few individuals in his line of work who exhibited a similar level of ruthlessness. The detective wanted to create a fake crime scene at Dalia and Mike's home to see how Dalia would react on the day of the alleged hit. To do this, they needed to know Dalia's whereabouts. At 5:30 a.m., Dalia told Mike she was going to the gym, which Mike found unusual since she had never gone that early before. However, he didn't think much of it and continued with his morning routine. The detective kept an eye on Dalia to make sure she went to the gym and went inside. This confirmed that the plan could move forward. But before setting up the faked crime scene, the detective needed to fill Mike Dio in on what was happening. About 30 minutes after Dalia left for the gym, loud banging noises were heard at Mike and Dalia's house, prompting Mike to rush to the door. When he opened it, he was surprised to find several police officers standing there. Confused and worried, Mike asked them what was going on. The detective informed Mike that his wife, Dalia, had tried to hire a hitman to kill him, but the hitman was actually an undercover cop. The entire situation was a setup to look like a murder-for-hire plot. Mike was in shock when the police told him that his wife had hired someone to kill him. The detectives took him to the police station, leaving his home to be staged as a crime scene with fake police tape and lights. The detectives then called Dalia, telling her that they needed to question her about an incident involving her husband. When she arrived home, she found her house surrounded by police cars and crime scene tape. The detective told her that her husband had been murdered, and she broke down in tears. However, the detective noticed that Dalia's reaction seemed unusual, as she didn't produce any tears. The detective began questioning Dalia about suspects, trying to get her to confess to hiring the hitman. Dalia claimed that her marriage was fine and that Mike's problems with probation and a stock fraud conviction might have led to his murder. Unbeknownst to her, Mike was watching from another room. The detective then revealed that they knew the truth behind the murder and brought in Sergeant Whitey Jean, who Dalia claimed she didn't know. The detective arrested Dalia for solicitation of murder, revealing that the hitman was an undercover cop. Mike was given the chance to confront Dalia, but she refused to admit her guilt. Dalia's trial took place on April 26, 2011, where Mike testified against her for 3 days. Her defense argued that the entire plot was a publicity stunt for a reality TV show, but Mike denied any involvement. Mike denied any interest in reality TV shows and claimed he had no involvement in Dalia's alleged plot to kill him. He also stated he had no knowledge of public relations. After the trial, the jury found Dalia guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder with a firearm, and she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Mike was relieved by the verdict, but also felt a sense of closure, knowing justice had been served. However, Dalia's attorneys appealed the conviction, citing a juror's remark about Dalia poisoning Mike's Starbucks drink, which was not presented as evidence during the trial. The appellate court reversed the conviction, and a second trial was held. Despite the state's confidence in their case, the jury reached a hung verdict, resulting in a mistrial. A third trial was held, and Dalia was again found guilty, this time receiving a 16-year prison sentence. Dalia's defense team continued to appeal her conviction, but the Florida Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review her case. Her attorneys plan to file a motion with a federal judge to review the third trial for constitutional violations, which would be their last chance to secure a new trial. Despite her conviction, Dalia has become a respected figure in prison, leading a Bible study group and earning praise from fellow inmates. She is separated from her young son, who lives with his grandmother, and deeply misses being with him.